The sun hung low over Millbrook, Indiana, casting long amber shadows across the gravel lot of Brennan's auto repair. Jake Brennan wiped his hands on an already oil-stained rag, ready to close up for the night. The day had been long, the work steady, but unremarkable. He was reaching for the garage door chain when a rusted Dodge Caravan sputtered into the lot, its engine coughing and wheezing like it had given up on life entirely. A young woman stepped out, her face tight with worry, exhaustion evident in the slump of her shoulders. A little girl emerged from the back seat, clutching a worn, stuffed rabbit against her chest, her eyes taking in everything with quiet intensity. Jake glanced at the clock mounted above the workbench. 6:15. He should have been home by now, but something in the way the woman's hands trembled as she approached made him pause. He listened to the engine, diagnosed the problem in under a minute, and got to work without a word. 20 minutes later, the van hummed to life, running smoother than it probably had in months. The woman reached for her wallet, but Jake shook his head. No charge. As he bent down to wipe his hands one final time, he felt a small tug at his sleeve. The little girl stood there, eyes wide and impossibly serious. She leaned close and whispered words, so quiet he almost missed them. "She is my mom. Please be my dad." Jake Brennan had not always been a man of silence and solitude. There was a time, not so very long ago in years, but an eternity in feeling, when laughter came easy, when his voice filled the rooms of his small house with stories and jokes that made his wife Sarah roll her eyes and mock exasperation, and his son Ethan giggle uncontrollably until he hiccuped. But that was before the accident, before the phone call that shattered everything, before a drunk driver ran a red light on a Tuesday evening and took everything that mattered in a single violent moment of twisted metal and broken glass. That was 7 years ago now. Ethan would have been 15, probably begging for driving lessons and practicing that sullen teenage expression in the mirror, probably giving Jake gray hairs with his attitude and his music and his mysterious silences. Instead, Jake had gray hairs for different reasons entirely. The kind that came from grief that never quite went away, just settled into the bones like an old injury that HHD when the weather changed. A constant companion that he had learned to live with but never learned to love. After the funeral, people told him he needed to move on, needed to start fresh, needed to find happiness again. They said it with good intentions, their voices soft with sympathy, their eyes full of that particular pity reserved for the bereaved, as if grief were a town you could simply drive through and leave in your rearview mirror, a phase rather than a permanent condition. But Jake did not move on. He could not. He moved inward. Instead, he built walls out of routine and discipline, constructed a life that was manageable precisely because it asked nothing of him emotionally and gave nothing in return. He woke at 5:30 every morning, the alarm unnecessary because his body had learned the rhythm. He ran 3 miles regardless of weather, rain or shine, summer heat or winter cold. He opened the garage at 7, closed it at 6, and spent his evenings in the small house he had once shared with his family. Now too quiet, too empty, but familiar enough that he could navigate it without thinking, without feeling, without remembering too much. The garage became his sanctuary, his refuge, the one place where the world made sense. There was honesty in mechanical work that Jake deeply appreciated, a clarity that human relationships could never offer. Engines did not lie. They did not make promises they could not keep. They did not disappear in the middle of the night or get taken away by circumstances beyond anyone's control. When something was broken, you could see it, touch it, understand exactly what had gone wrong and why. And when you fixed it, it stayed fixed. There was no ambiguity, no uncertainty, no hoping for the best and preparing for the worst. Just problems and solutions, cause and effect. The satisfying click of parts fitting together the way they were supposed to, the purr of an engine restored to health. His customers knew him as reliable, fair, meticulous, and almost pathologically uncommunicative. He quoted prices accurately, finished work ahead of schedule when possible, and never once tried to upsell a service that was not genuinely needed. In a town full of mechanics who would invent problems to pad their invoices, who would shake their heads gravely at simple issues and quote astronomical prices, Jake's honesty had earned him a steady stream of loyal business. But it had also earned him a reputation for being cold, distant, unfriendly, the kind of man you trusted with your car, but never thought to invite to a barbecue or a holiday party. Never asked about his weekend or his family or his plans for the future. Jake did not mind a reputation. In fact, he quietly cultivated it, encouraged it through his silences and his refusals of social invitations. Friendliness invited connection, and connection invited loss. He had learned that lesson the hard way, carved it into his heart with grief so sharp it still drew blood if he thought about it too long. Better to keep people at arm's length, to interact through the safe medium of transactions and services rendered. Better to be the reliable mechanic than the grieving widower, the steady businessman than the broken father who still saw his son's face in every young boy who walked past the garage. His apartment above the garage was sparse, almost monastic in its simplicity. A bed with plain sheets, a couch that had seen better days, a television he rarely watched except when the silence became too loud. The kitchen held the basics for survival and nothing more. On the wall hung a single photograph in a simple wooden frame. Sarah and Ethan at the county fair the summer before the accident. The last summer, the last photograph. Ethan was missing his 2 front teeth, grinning like he had just won the lottery. Cotton candy residue still visible on his cheek. Sarah was laughing at something Jake had said, her head thrown back. Pure joy radiating from every line of her beautiful face. Her hand resting on Ethan's shoulder with the casual intimacy of a mother who did not know her time was running out. Jake looked at that photo every morning when he woke and every night before he slept. It was the only indulgence he allowed himself. The only crack in the armor he had built so carefully over 7 long years. So when the little girl whispered those words, "Please be my dad," Jake felt something shift inside him. Something tectonic and terrifying. Something he had thought was dead and buried with his wife and son stirred in the darkness, stretched, reached toward the light, and for one heart-stopping moment, he did not know whether to run toward it or away from it, whether to embrace it or crush it back down where it belonged. He chose away. He always chose away. It was safer that way, even if it was also lonelier. The girl's name was Lucy. Jake learned that much before Emily, her mother, ushered her back into the van with hurried apologies and embarrassed thank yous. Her cheeks flushed with mortification. "Kids say the strangest things," Emily said, not meeting his eyes, her voice pitched high with nervous energy. "I am so sorry." She did not mean anything by it. Jake nodded, said nothing because there was nothing to say, and watched as the van pulled out of the lot and disappeared down Main Street into the gathering dusk. He stood there for a long moment, the echo of Lucy's words still ringing in his ears, the phantom pressure of her small hand on his sleeve still tingling on his skin. Then he locked up the garage and went home, where he sat in the dark for hours, not thinking about anything at all, not allowing himself to think, because thinking would mean feeling. But something had changed, something fundamental. Jake could feel it in the way his routine no longer quite fit, like a shirt that had shrunk in the wash, like shoes that pinched after years of comfortable wear. He went through the motions, as he always had. Wake, run, work, sleep, but there was a restlessness now, an itch he could not scratch. He found himself looking up whenever the garage door creaked open, half expecting to see a rusted Dodge Caravan pulling into the lot. He caught himself wondering where Lucy and Emily had come from, where they were going, whether the van was still running properly. Lucy had looked at him the way Ethan used to look at him, with that particular combination of trust and curiosity and complete acceptance that children reserved for the adults they loved. Not at the mechanic, not at the businessman, not at the polite stranger who fixed things and asked for nothing in return. She had looked at the man underneath, the one Jake worked so hard to keep hidden. And somehow, impossibly, she had seen something worth wanting there, something worth reaching for, something worth asking for in a whisper that still echoed in his dreams. It scared him more than he wanted to admit, because grief, at least, was familiar now. But hope was dangerous. Hope could destroy you in ways that grief never could. That night, Jake sat alone in his apartment and stared at the photograph on the wall. He wondered what Sarah would say if she could see him now. He wondered if she would be proud of how he had survived or disappointed at how he had merely continued to exist. He did not sleep well. In his dreams, a little girl with serious eyes asked him a question he did not know how to answer. 3 days passed without incident. Jake began to convince himself that the encounter had been an anomaly, a momentary disruption in the carefully ordered life he had built. But on the 4th day, Lucy returned to the garage. Not with her mother, not with car trouble. She simply appeared at the door, backpack over one shoulder, as if she had walked there straight from school. She did not say hello. She just stood in the doorway, watching Jake work on a pickup truck with the patient intensity of someone who had all the time in the world. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Jake could feel her eyes on him, tracking his movements as he replaced a worn belt. He wanted to ask her why she was there, where her mother was, whether someone knew where she had gone. But he found that he could not bring himself to break the silence. There was something peaceful about it, something that reminded him of the way Ethan used to sit on an overturned bucket and watch him work, asking questions only when they occurred to him, content simply to be present. Lucy wandered closer, her gaze fixed on the photograph. Jake kept pinned to the wall near his workbench. It was a smaller copy of the one in his apartment. Sarah and Ethan at the fair, frozen in a moment of perfect happiness. She studied it for a long time, her expression thoughtful. Then she turned to Jake with a question in her eyes. "Is that your family?" she asked. Her voice was quiet but clear, without the hesitation or shyness Jake might have expected. Jake's hands stilled on the engine. He had never told anyone about Sarah and Ethan, not because he wanted to keep them secret, but because talking about them made them feel further away somehow, like characters in a story he had once read rather than the people who had made up his entire world. But something about Lucy's directness, her simple curiosity without pity or agenda, made him answer. "Yes," he said, "that is my family." Lucy nodded as if this confirmed something she had already suspected. "Where are they now?" she asked. Jake looked at the photograph, at Sarah's laughing face and Ethan's gap-toothed grin. He thought about all the ways he could answer that question, all the euphemisms and deflections he could employ. But Lucy deserved honesty. She had given him honesty after all, in that whispered request that still echoed in his memory. "They died," he said simply, "a long time ago." Lucy absorbed this information without visible reaction. She turned back to the photograph, studying it with new understanding. Then she looked at Jake with those serious two-old eyes. "My dad left," she said. "Before I was born, I have never met him." It was not a comparison, not an attempt to equate her loss with his. It was simply information offered with the same matter-of-fact clarity with which she had asked her question. Jake found himself nodding, acknowledging the shared space they occupied, the territory of loss and absence that they both knew too well. "That is hard," he said. "Not having a father," Lucy shrugged, a gesture that seemed too adult for her 8 years. "I never had one," she said. "So, I do not really know what I am missing, but sometimes I see other kids with their dads, and I wonder what it would be like." She fell silent, and Jake realized she was waiting, not for comfort or reassurance, but for something real, something true. He thought about all the meaningless platitudes people had offered him after the accident, all the hollow words that were supposed to make him feel better but only made him feel more alone. He would not do that to Lucy. "It is different," he said carefully, "to lose something you had versus never having it at all. But missing what could have been is its own kind of hurt." Lucy considered this. Then she nodded, apparently satisfied. She picked up a wrench from the workbench, examined it with the careful attention of a scientist studying a specimen. "What does this one do?" she asked. And just like that, the moment passed. Jake spent the next hour explaining the tools of his trade, while Lucy listened with genuine interest, asking questions that revealed a surprisingly mechanical mind. She wanted to know how engines worked, why oil was important, what made a car stop when you pressed the brakes. Jake found himself answering in more detail than he had spoken to anyone in years, surprised by how easily the words came when someone actually wanted to hear them. When Emily pulled into the lot an hour later, her face pale with worry, Lucy waved goodbye to Jake as if they were old friends. "See you later," she said, and Jake found himself hoping that she meant it. That night, Jake sat in his apartment and thought about Lucy, about the way she looked at him without judgment or expectation, without the complicated emotions adults brought to every interaction, about the way she had asked about his family and accepted his answer without trying to fix him or feel sorry for him, about the way she reminded him, in ways he could not quite articulate, of the son he had lost. Emily had apologized profusely for Lucy wandering off, promised it would not happen again. Jake had nodded and said all the right things, but secretly, guilty, he hoped Emily was wrong. There was something about Lucy's presence that felt like the first warm day after a long winter. Unexpected, uncomfortable in its newness, but undeniably welcome. He looked at the photograph of Sarah and Ethan. For the first time in 7 years, he did not feel only grief when he saw their faces. He felt something else, something that might have been permission, as if they were telling him it was okay to let someone in. Just a little, just for a while. Jake did not believe in signs or fate or cosmic intervention, but that night, as he finally drifted off to sleep, he allowed himself to wonder if maybe, just maybe, Lucy had appeared in his garage for a reason. Meanwhile, across town, Emily sat at the tiny kitchen table of their rented apartment and watched her daughter sleep. Lucy looked peaceful, her face soft and untroubled, the stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin. But Emily knew that appearances could be deceiving. She knew about the hard edges Lucy hid behind her quiet demeanor. The questions she never asked, but clearly thought about. Tonight, for the first time in months, Lucy had talked about the mechanic. His name is Jake, she had said over dinner. He lost his family, too, but he is still kind. Emily did not know what to make of that. She had spent 8 years protecting Lucy from disappointment, from the kind of hope that only led to hurt. She had learned young that men were unreliable, that promises meant nothing, that the only person you could count on was yourself. She had raised Lucy to be self-sufficient, to need no one, to expect nothing from the world but what you could earn through hard work and determination. But watching her daughter light up when she talked about Jake and his tools and his patient explanations, Emily felt something crack inside her. A wall she had built so carefully, so deliberately showed its first hairline fracture. She thought about the mechanic, about his quiet competence, his refusal of payment, the way he had looked at Lucy, not with annoyance or impatience, but with something that might have been recognition. She thought about how long it had been since someone had done something kind for her, without expecting anything in return. Do not get attached, she told herself firmly. They were just passing through. The job in Columbus was waiting. The fresh start she had promised Lucy. The new life where no one knew their history or their struggles. This town, this garage, this too-kind mechanic, they were temporary. They had to be. But even as she thought it, Emily knew she was lying to herself because for the first time in years, Lucy had looked at someone and seen a father. And Emily had no idea what to do with that. The rain started around noon, a sudden downpour that turned the sky dark and sent customers scurrying for cover. Jake watched it through the garage door, content to wait out the storm. He had nowhere to be, nothing pressing to do. The quiet suited him. When the Dodge Caravan pulled into the lot, Jake felt his heart do something strange. He told himself it was just surprise, just the unexpectedness of seeing Emily and Lucy again. But as Emily stepped out of the car and ran through the rain toward the garage, he knew it was more than that. "I came to pay you," Emily said, shaking water from her hair. "For the repair last week, you never gave me a bill." Jake shook his head. "I told you no charge." Emily's jaw tightened. "I do not take charity." "It is not charity. It was a 1-5-minute fix, and the part cost me nothing. Consider it a professional courtesy." They stood there for a moment, two stubborn people unwilling to give ground. Rain droned on the roof, filling the silence between them. Then, Lucy emerged from the van, running through the downpour with her backpack over her head, and the tension broke. "Hi, Jake," Lucy said cheerfully, as if she had been greeting him every day for years. "Can I see the tools again?" Emily looked like she wanted to object, but something in her daughter's face stopped her. She glanced at Jake, a question in her eyes. "She is welcome to look around," Jake said. If you do not mind waiting out the storm. It was not quite an invitation, but it was close. Emily hesitated, then nodded. The next hour was the strangest Jake had experienced in years. Lucy peppered him with questions, while Emily sat on a bench near the door, pretending to read something on her phone, but clearly watching them. Jake found himself explaining the difference between drum brakes and disc brakes, the purpose of a timing belt, the importance of regular oil changes. Lucy absorbed it all with fierce concentration, occasionally nodding as if filing the information away for future reference. At some point, Emily put away her phone and simply watched. Jake caught her eye once and saw something there he could not quite identify. Not suspicion, not weariness, but something softer, something that looked almost like hope, quickly suppressed. When the rain finally stopped, Emily stood and called for Lucy. It was time to go. Lucy looked disappointed, but did not argue. "Thank you," Emily said to Jake. Her voice was formal, but her eyes were not for letting her stay. She does not usually warm up to people so quickly. Jake shrugged, uncomfortable with the gratitude. She is a good kid, smart, curious. You should be proud. Something flickered across Emily's face. I am, she said quietly. Every single day they left, and Jake stood in the doorway watching until the van disappeared around the corner. The garage felt emptier than it had before they arrived, which made no sense. Nothing had changed. Everything was exactly as it had been. But Jake knew that was not true. Something had shifted. Some invisible boundary had been crossed. He had let them in just a little. And now he had to figure out what that meant. Lucy's words came 3 days later. Not whispered this time, but spoken clearly in the middle of a conversation about fuel injectors. They had developed a routine by then. Lucy stopping by after school. Emily picking her up an hour later. Jake had not invited it exactly, but he had not discouraged it either. You know what I think? Lucy said, putting down the spark plug she had been examining. I think you make broken things feel less broken. Jake went still. The words hit him somewhere deep, somewhere he had thought was walled off and inaccessible. He did not know what to say, how to respond to such simple, devastating honesty. Lucy did not seem to expect a response. She just picked up the spark plug again and asked how it worked, but Jake could not focus on the explanation. His mind kept circling back to what she had said. You make broken things feel less broken. He thought about his life, about the careful routines and deliberate isolation. He thought about how hard he had worked to feel nothing, to want nothing, to need no one. And he realized that somewhere along the way he had stopped living and started merely surviving, existing, going through the motions of a life without any of the substance. Lucy had seen that. This 8-year-old girl had looked at him and seen not just the grief and the loss and the walls he had built, but something underneath. Something still capable of connection, still capable of making things better. Even if those things were just cars and carburetors. It was not a revelation. Jake had always known on some level that he was hiding from life rather than living it. But having it articulated so simply, so matter-of-factly by a child who barely knew him, that was something else entirely. That night, Jake looked at the photograph of Sarah and Ethan and spoke to them for the first time in years. He told them about Lucy, about her questions, and her quiet wisdom. He told them about Emily, about her fierce independence, and the worry that never quite left her eyes. He told them he was scared, scared of caring again, scared of losing again, scared of everything that came with letting people in. But mostly he told them he was tired. Tired of being alone, tired of keeping the world at arm's length, tired of pretending that safety was the same thing as happiness. He did not expect an answer. He did not get one. But when he finally fell asleep, he dreamed of Sarah, and she was smiling. The note appeared on a Tuesday morning, tucked under the garage door when Jake arrived to open up. Plain white paper, neat handwriting, the words simple and direct. Thank you for being kind to my daughter. She talks about you all the time. You have given her something I could not. A positive example of what a man can be. I do not know how to repay that, so I will not try. Just know that it matters more than you probably realize. There was no signature, no phone number, no invitation to continue the connection. Emily, was drawing a boundary. Jake understood, acknowledging what had happened while making clear that she expected nothing more. It was exactly what he would have done in her position. He folded the note carefully and put it in his wallet. Then he went to work, the same as always, but something had changed. The note was proof that he had mattered to someone, that his existence had made a difference in two lives he had barely touched. It was a small thing, maybe, but to a man who had spent 7 years convinced he had nothing left to offer the world, it felt like everything. Lucy continued to visit, and Jake continued to teach her. They moved beyond tools now into actual mechanics. Jake showed her how to change oil, how to check tire pressure, how to identify the signs of a worn brake pad. Lucy took to it all with natural aptitude, her small hands surprisingly steady, her mind quick and precise. Emily noticed the change in her daughter. The nervous energy that had always hummed beneath Lucy's surface began to quiet. She slept better. She smiled more. She stopped asking questions about the father she had never known, and started asking questions about engines and transmissions and the proper torque for a lug nut. Something was healing in Lucy, and Emily knew it had everything to do with Jake. The knowledge terrified her. She had spent 8 years teaching Lucy not to depend on anyone, not to expect kindness, not to hope for things that would never come. And now here was this quiet mechanic dismantling all those lessons simply by being decent. But Emily was changing too. She found herself looking forward to picking up Lucy, not because she was worried about her daughter, but because she wanted to see Jake, wanted to watch him explain things to Lucy with endless patience, wanted to feel just for a moment what it might be like to have someone reliable in their lives. It scared her, but not enough to make her stop. Emily came alone on a Friday afternoon, 2 weeks after the first repair. The van was fine. She had no excuse to be there, but she came anyway, stood in the doorway of the garage, and told Jake they were leaving. "Colas," she said. "I got a job there. Better pay, better schools for Lucy. We leave Sunday." Jake nodded slowly. He had known this was coming, had felt it in the temporary nature of every interaction. But knowing did not make it easier. "That is good," he said. "A fresh start. Lucy will thrive." Emily's smile was sad. "She has thrived here because of you." She stepped closer, and for a moment, Jake thought she might reach for him, might cross the careful distance they had maintained. But she stopped herself, her hands curling at her sides. "I want you to know," she said, "that you taught her something I never could. That not all men leave. That some people are kind without wanting anything in return. That it is okay to trust, at least a little." Jake did not know what to say. The words felt too big, too important, too much like goodbye. Emily smiled again, steadier this time. "She will be okay. We both will, because of what you gave us here." "I did not give anything," Jake said. "I just fixed a car." But they both knew that was not true. Lucy's goodbye was harder. She came to the garage on Saturday morning, her last day in town, and stood in the familiar doorway with her backpack over one shoulder. "I do not want to go," she said. It was not a complaint, not a plea, just a statement of fact. Jake knelt down to her level, something he had never done before. "I know," he said, "but Columbus is going to be great. New school, new friends, new places to explore." Lucy shook her head. "That is not what I mean. I do not want to leave you." The words hit Jake like a physical blow. He had to take a breath before he could respond. "I will still be here," he said. "Whenever you come back to visit, and you can write me letters if you want. Tell me about your new life." Lucy considered this. Then she reached into her backpack and pulled out a wrench, the small one Jake had given her to practice with, the one she had been carrying around for weeks. "You keep this," she said. "So you remember me?" Jake took the wrench, feeling its familiar weight in his palm. He looked at this serious, too wise little girl, and felt something crack inside him, not breaking exactly, opening. "I could never forget you," he said. "You taught me something too, you know." Lucy tilted her head. "What?" "That being strong does not mean being loud. That sometimes the quietest people see the most clearly. That it is okay to let people in even when you are scared." Lucy nodded, as if this made perfect sense. Then she stepped forward and hugged him quickly, fiercely before pulling back. "Bye, Jake," she said, and then she was gone, running toward the van where Emily waited. Not looking back, because looking back was too hard. Jake stood in the doorway of his garage and watched them drive away. He held Lucy's wrench in his hand and felt the weight of everything that had happened, everything that had changed, everything that would never be the same. He did not cry. He had not cried in 7 years, not since the funeral, but something shifted in his chest. Some pressure released, and when he finally turned back to his work, the garage felt different. Fuller, somehow, like Lucy, had left something behind besides the wrench. The next morning, Jake woke at 5:30 as always. He ran his 3 miles, showered, and opened the garage at 7. Business was steady. An oil change, a tire rotation, a mysterious rattle that turned out to be a loose heat shield. Normal, predictable, the same as it had been before Lucy and Emily appeared. But Jake was not the same. He caught himself explaining things to customers, not just prices and procedures, but reasons and logic. He found himself making eye contact, nodding hello to people he saw on the street. Small things, tiny changes, but they added up. A month later, a young man named Marcus applied for an apprenticeship. He was 19, fresh out of trade school, eager to learn, but nervous about his inexperience. Jake saw something in him, a quiet determination that reminded him of Lucy. He hired Marcus on the spot. Teaching Marcus was different from teaching Lucy. More technical, more detailed, more focused on career preparation than simple curiosity. But the core was the same: patience, clarity, the conviction that knowledge was meant to be shared, not hoarded. Marcus bloomed under Jake's mentorship. Within 6 months, he was handling routine repairs on his own. Within a year, he was taking on complex diagnostics. His confidence growing with each successful fix. He started referring to Jake as his teacher, which made Jake uncomfortable, but also secretly proud. Other young mechanics followed Marcus. The garage became known as a place where you could learn, really learn, not just hold tools and watch. Jake found himself running informal training sessions, explaining theory alongside practice, treating every question as an opportunity rather than an interruption. He did not become a different person. He was still quiet, still reserved, still more comfortable with engines than with people. But he was present now, engaged, participating in the world rather than hiding from it. The walls he had built so carefully had not crumbled, but doors had appeared in them, doors he actually used. Emily and Lucy wrote sometimes, short letters, updates on their new life. Lucy was doing well in school, making friends, still fascinated by how things worked. Emily had gotten a promotion, was dating someone nice, was thinking about the future with hope instead of fear. They seemed happy, stable, building a life that had nothing to do with Jake, but somehow felt connected to him anyway. He kept their letters in a drawer, read them when he felt the walls starting to close in. They reminded him that his kindness had mattered, that the brief intersection of their lives had left lasting marks on all of them. It was a strange kind of comfort, knowing that people he had barely known were out there carrying pieces of what they had shared. 5 years passed. Marcus left to open his own shop 2 towns over, sending Jake a thank you note that almost made him cry. New apprentices came and went. The garage stayed the same, a small island of reliability in a changing world. Lucy never came back to visit. Emily never called. The letters grew less frequent, then stopped entirely. Jake understood. Life moved on. People moved on. The connection they had shared was real, but finite, a season rather than a lifetime. But he still had the wrench. He kept it on his workbench, right next to the photograph of Sarah and Ethan. Sometimes, when the garage was quiet and the world felt too big and too empty, he would pick it up and remember, not with grief, not with longing, but with gratitude, for the little girl who had looked at him and seen something worth wanting, for her mother who had trusted him despite every reason not to, for the brief, bright moment when 3 broken people had made each other feel a little less alone. Family, Jake had learned, was not about belonging to each other. It was not about shared blood, or legal bonds, or promises of forever. It was about impact, about the marks we leave on each other, The ways we change and are changed by the people who pass through our lives. Lucy had been his family for one strange, unexpected month. She had taught him that he still had something to offer, still had the capacity to care, still had room in his broken heart for connection. He would never see her again, probably would never know if she remembered him, if the wrench he gave her sat in a drawer somewhere, or had long since been lost or forgotten. It did not matter. What mattered was that she had existed in his life, however briefly. What mattered was that she had looked at him with serious eyes and whispered a request that changed everything. Please be my dad. He had not become her dad. He had not become anything really, except perhaps a slightly better version of himself. But that was enough. That was more than enough. The garage door was open to let in the evening breeze. Jake sat on his stool, cleaning tools that did not really need cleaning, thinking about nothing in particular. Another small piece of a life that against all odds had become something worth living. A car pulled into the lot. Jake looked up, ready to explain that they were closed for the night, that he could fit them in first thing tomorrow. But the words died in his throat. The woman who stepped out of the car was older now, her hair shorter, her face more lined. But Jake recognized her immediately. How could he not? Lucy, he said. She smiled, the same serious smile he remembered from years ago. Hi, Jake, she said. I was in the area. Thought I would stop by. She was not a child anymore. She was a young woman, confident and capable with calluses on her hands that suggested she worked with them regularly. She walked toward the garage with the easy stride of someone who knew exactly where she was going. I am a mechanic now, she said. Diesel engines, mostly trucks, and heavy equipment. I have my own shop in Columbus. Jake stared at her. He could not think of a single thing to say. Lucy's smile widened. I know, she said. Crazy, right? But I kept thinking about you, about how you explained things, about how you made it all make sense. She paused, her expression growing serious. I wanted to thank you properly, for everything you gave me. I did not give you anything, Jake said automatically. Lucy shook her head. You gave me a model, a template for what it meant to be good at something, to take pride in your work, to help people without expecting anything back. She looked around the garage, taking in the familiar tools, the workbench, the photograph still pinned to the wall. You gave me this, she said. All of this. Jake felt something tighten in his chest. All the years of silence, all the letters that had stopped coming, all the wondering whether he had made any difference at all. It collapsed into this moment. This proof that nothing was ever wasted. That even the smallest kindness could ripple outward in ways you never imagined. Your mom, he said. How is she? Good, happy. She got married a few years ago. Nice guy. Treats her well. Lucy's smile softened. She talks about you sometimes. About the mechanic who fixed our car and fixed something else, too. Jake nodded slowly. He thought about Emily, about her fierce independence and her carefully hidden hope, about the way she had trusted him with her daughter, even when every instinct told her not to. I am glad, he said, that she is happy, that you both are. Lucy reached into her pocket and pulled out something small. She held it out to Jake. It was a wrench, different from the one she had given him all those years ago, newer and shinier, but the same size, the same weight. I know you still have mine, Lucy said. I saw it on your workbench. So, I thought I would replace it. New tools for new work. Jake took the wrench. His hands were shaking just slightly. He did not trust himself to speak. I am not staying, Lucy said. I have to get back. But I wanted you to know that it mattered. What you did, who you were, it mattered more than you could possibly understand. She stepped forward and hugged him. The same quick, fierce embrace she had given him the day she left. Then she pulled back, her eyes bright. Bye, Jake, she said, and thank you for everything. She walked back to her car, started the engine, and drove away. Jake stood in the doorway of his garage and watched her go, the new wrench in one hand, the weight of years and memory and grace pressing against his chest. He looked down at the tool she had given him. Then he looked at the photograph of Sarah and Ethan, still smiling, still frozen in their moment of perfect happiness. "I think I finally understand," he said to them, "what it means to be a father, what it means to be family. It was not about being there forever. It was not about promises or permanence or belonging. It was about showing up, being kind, giving what you could without expecting anything back. It was about one free car repair on a summer evening, 1 hour of patient explanation, one small act of decency that changed a little girl's life." Jake set the new wrench on his workbench next to the old one. 2 tools, 2 moments, 2 proofs that nothing was ever truly lost. Then he picked up a rag, wiped his hands, and got back to